Es steht ja noch die Frage im Raum, warum eine australische Post, eine Berliner, ich werde dich jetzt nicht zitieren, aber Firma wählt, um ihre Engine zu nehmen. Und wir freuen uns jetzt aus Australien Herrn Parker begrüßen zu dürfen. Mr. Parker, my daughter will travel to Sydney in October. So what exceptional experiences will she have with the Australian Post? What kind of exceptional experiences do you offer her to go to the Australian Post?
Well, I'd love to say we're going to offer exceptional digital experiences. No.
Okay, I will tell her. Okay. Ja, Ihre Bühne. Ja.
Dankeschön. Okay, guten Tag. Mein Deutsch ist nicht sehr gut. Deshalb ich hoffe, Sie mich verstehen werden, ich auf Englisch präsentieren. Ja? Ist gut? Dankeschön. Okay, I'm sure everyone here is aware of the effects of digital disruption on large organizations. But did you know that even the humble mirror has been digitally disrupted? I used to see people grooming themselves in their hand mirrors, and that's no longer the case. They're now actually using their mobile phone as the mirror. And even in the retail clothing store, the mirror has been replaced by a smart mirror. So when I'm trying on my clothing, the smart mirror can show me what I'm wearing from all angles. It can show me what I'm wearing with different lighting backgrounds. It can show me what I'm wearing with different backgrounds altogether. It can even show me what I tried on in my last experience. So it's all about access to information. It's all about the customer experience. Digital disruption is here. My name's Rob Parker. I'm from Australia Post, and I'm here to talk to you about customer experience engineering. So we can build exceptional customer experiences using BPM technology. Your success may depend on your talent available. We can build exceptional customer experiences using BPM technology, and we call this customer experience engineering. Now, many of you might be thinking, I've heard this before, in the 80s and 90s it was business process re-engineering, and in the new millennium we might call it Lean and Six Sigma. But this is different. This is not about optimizing your existing processes. It's not about re-engineering your existing customer experience, your customer processes. This is about putting yourself in the customer's shoes and asking, what is the experience the customer wants? So digital disruption is everywhere. And it's not hard to find surveys online which indicate that digital disruption and customer experience is the top of most organizations' agendas. And if you Google search customer experience, you'll find your Gartner and your Forrester surveys indicating that customer experience is at the top of the CEO's mind. And there's lots of content out there which suggests that most organizations will recognize that customer experience will either directly or indirectly affect their bottom line. So competitive differentiation based on new product features or increased product features or better production, lower production costs has diminished. Hasn't completely been removed, but it has diminished. And customer value is now particularly notable in today's society. And for service organizations like ourselves, where we might deliver some intangible customer value, customer experience is the king. So customer experience is the new differentiator. Customer experience is the emerging battleground. So there's some key trends happening in the Australian economy and the Australian social agenda, and that is we've become great adopters of digital technology. In fact, there's more digital devices than people now. And in my own household, I can count one desktop, one laptop, one notepad, one current mobile phone, one old model mobile phone per household member. And I didn't even think our household was a digital household. And even now in our Australia Post website, mobile traffic to the website exceeds desktop traffic. So think about that. Customers are no longer tethered to their desktop. They're now mobile. They're connected to our organizations all the time. They're connected to their social media networks all the time. So digital adoption brings power to the individual. Customers are now mobile-centric. They want personalized services. They want effortless experiences. They want omni-channel experiences, and they want it on their terms. So what has been Australia Post's response to this? Well, it's no surprise, like many organisations, we've been affected by digital disruption. Should be no surprise that mail volume is declining and continue to decline. And like many organisations, we're in a transition from a product-centric customer engagement model to a more customer-centric engagement model. And in addition, we are transitioning from predominantly a physical-based experience, and we're embracing more digital experiences. So we recognise that the needs of the consumer have changed. We've embraced digital as we undertake our own digital transformation. And we recognise that we have the opportunity to develop the business of supporting customers in their everyday jobs to be done. And that includes managing deliveries, manage paying bills, manage their banking, manage travel, managing other services. So what does a great customer experience comprise? Well, it's 3 items. Number 1, it's access to information. And it's not like access to any information, it's access to relevant information. We could expose that a parcel has transitioned from hub A to hub B, but that's not what the information the customer's after. The customer wants to know, when is my parcel going to arrive? Where is my parcel going to arrive? 2, customers want to act on information. So we need to give them information they can act on. Beyond access to the information, customers want to be able to do things like, if I know when my parcel is going to arrive and I'm not going to be home, I can act on it and redirect or reschedule. If the delivery was unable to be delivered because I was not home, give customers the ability to act on it by delegating collection to somebody else. So give customers access to relevant information and give them access to actions when it makes sense. And number 3, customers want assured delivery assurance. It's about predictability, it's about consistency of the experience. So when I reschedule or redirect that parcel, it actually happens. And when I pay the bill gets paid. So event-driven customer experience processes built on BPM technology can deliver on this. They can deliver and orchestrate information and the right information at the right time. They can act on events from systems or commands from customers in terms of interacting with these experiences. And they can also orchestrate across system boundaries, so we get reliable, assured delivery of service. Okay. So how do we engineer a customer experience? It's about putting yourself in the customer's shoes and asking what they want. It's about designing customer experience processes and engineering moments of truth into them. So let me take simple digital bill payment. What are the moments of truth? The moments of truth are 1, that the bill has arrived. Moment of truth is I can pay the bill. Moment of truth is the bill was due, then it's overdue. And what are the actions the customer wants? Well, the customer might want to pay it now. A customer might want to schedule payment, such as it's paid on time. A customer might want to set up a reminder, such that they get reminded just before the bill becomes overdue and they can pay the bill. So we can build these actions and these experiences into BPM. And some of you might be thinking, isn't this just software engineering? And it is. But we wanted to differentiate this from software engineering. If software engineering is about creating new Lego building blocks, then customer experience engineering, realizing these processes using BPM technology, is about assembling these Lego building blocks into new experiences. So it's less about building stuff, it's more about assembling and using the stuff you already have. So with customer experience engineering, you can reduce building those inside-out experiences which don't resonate with customers. With customer experience engineering, you can maintain the products, services, and assets you already have while still delivering great customer experiences. And with customer experience engineering, you'll be able to deliver those wow customer experiences which really do differentiate your brand from the rest. So how can BPM technology realize great customer experiences? And this is basically an overview of our architecture. So we can interpose a process layer between customers, devices, channels, and our back-end systems. And it's in this process layer that we can effectively repackage system experiences into customer experiences. We can repackage the information into the information the customer wants. We can give customers a great omni-channel experience. These process instances become the source of truth. If a customer interacts with this process through one channel, it's immediately visible via all the other channels. If a system generates an event which changes the experience, changes the process, again, it's visible in all channels. So we get the omni-channel experience. We can have a consistent UI and a consistent experience. We can use these processes to deliver content to the user interface. And by decoupling the interface from these processes, we can get a consistent experience across devices. So the process layer is no longer responsible for rendering a UI, it's responsible for delivering content. And we can render that content onto the UI of each device by using responsive design and responsive technologies. This process layer can give customers access to the relevant information. So we can intercept events out of systems, we can intercept content out of systems, and we can repackage it and we can reshape it. We can turn that system-centric content into the customer-centric content, the content the customer really wants to see. The information can be actionable. With these processes, we can generate actions and expose them via the UI. And in addition, these processes can be adaptive. So for example, if a system generates an event which changes the state of the customer experience, some actions which previously were available, they might not make sense anymore. For example, if the bill has now become overdue, there's no point in having a reminder to say, remind me that it's payable. So with this process layer, it can intercept the event that the bill has now become overdue, and it can remove that reminder of action from the user experience. We can have process visibility and monitor end to end. So we can have that delivery on the promise. We can see exactly where the process is at. It can orchestrate across system boundaries, end-to-end visibility delivery. And because these customer experience processes tend to orchestrate across siloed product systems, we can introduce the higher probability of failure. So BPM technology is great at giving me that temporal decoupling. If one system's down, it's not reflected in the customer experience. It can be hidden in the process experience layer. And when that system comes back up, we can expose the experience to the customer. And we get fault isolation and fault management. If a system is having a fault, the process doesn't stop and throw an exception. The process can expose that as an incident in the monitoring console, etc. And the sum of the parts can be more than the sum of the whole can be more than the sum of the parts. So if I have product systems in silos and they're complementary, I can actually combine those into new experiences. So I can just about manufacture new products. So I might have had 2 products in 2 silo systems, and now I've got 3 experiences. I've got the native experience for each product, but I can mash them together. And an example of that is bill payment. For example, we can have a system which receives bills, and it just used to send out notifications that a bill's arrived. And we've got a system which is a prepaid banking facility which you can transact against. So now, when a bill arrives, I can look at the customer's product holdings and I can ascertain that they have this payment instrument, so I can now offer them experience. Do you want to pay that bill with that payment instrument you already have with us? So we can start to engineer these outside-in experiences rather than the inside-out experiences. So how do we design event-driven processes? How do we model adaptive event-driven processes? Well, for those of you who might have been familiar with the old event-driven or Windows programming paradigm, this could be a way. In that paradigm, you've got await for an event, receive event, dispatch to an event handler, repeat. That's what I've got here. So we've got the gateway which waits for an event, and when the event comes in, it dispatches to a handler. So that's good. It's got good characteristics. It's event-driven. It's extensible. If I need to introduce a new event, I can just add the new event. It's easy to understand. I can see all the events, and I can see what happened. It's using sophisticated BPMN. It's using one of those tricky, complex event-driven gateways. So it must be good, right? Yeah, this is the way to do it. No, that's not the way to do it. Don't do that. It's not the way to model these event-driven processes. You're getting some challenges. What if behaviors are mutually exclusive? It's really difficult to implement this in this pattern with a command handler. What if the behavior is dependent on a sequence of events, a series of events? You can't do it with this kind of pattern. And this becomes unwieldy and hard to manage. So if you do go down this path and you've got these complex behaviors, then it will be buried in those event handlers and not very maintainable, not very extensible. So what's the approach? And the approach we've taken is to divide and conquer. So we found that it's best to model your customer experience processes using less a transformational paradigm, which is I do activity A, then I do activity B, then I do activity B, and we model them more as finite state machines. So we can represent these finite state machines in BPM. And this is a very simple example. It's just using a player experience. So the player could be your iPad or it could be your DVD player. It's really just to get this across. And if I look at the states of that experience, the device is off, and when I hit the on button, I can transition into the red on state. And when I'm in the red on state, if I hit the play button, I transition into this green playing state, and I'll start playing the tracks. And if in the playing state I hit the pause button, I can transition into this blue pause state. And in the blue pause state, if I hit the resume button, I will go back into the playing state. So at a high level, our customer experience states look a lot like these states in a finite, hierarchical finite state machine. And this is how we can do it in BPMN. But there's more. We've got transient states. And we found that event-driven sub-processes are great for realizing transient states. So in this case, it's really simple. If I'm in the playing state and I hit the stop button, then I will transition through that red state, which is stop playing whatever it is. And no matter what state I'm in, if I hit the off button, I will transition through that green state, which will effectively shut everything down. So if I use my bill payment analogy, what's the experience states of the bill pay? The bill is either not paid or it's paid, on or off. The bill is current or it's overdue. I've got some nested substates. And the great thing about these states is they can encapsulate the information which is relevant to the customer. So rather than it being the system's information, from the state, we know the experience, and we can transform the information into the information which reflects the customer experience. So one of the challenges we faced was, what happens with out-of-sequence events? This is a contrived example. You don't get out-of-sequence events. But in the real world, with distributed systems, you can get out-of-sequence events. And we considered having lots of event-driven sub-processes to passively consume these events, or you could throw a BPMN exception, or you could do nothing and rely on your integration layer or your client layer to handle the exception. And it's an interesting open problem, and our thoughts at the moment is don't try and passively consume events. Avoid it if you can. And if you find that you are needing to use lots of event sub-processes to consume events, etc., and passively deal with them, you've either modeling at the wrong granularity, or you might need to consider using an adapter to change the granularity of your system events into more experience events. So in today's customer experience day, customers expect a great UI, so we can realize a great UI. We can realize a consistent user experience. As I said before, these customer experience processes, they publish content to this UI. This UI is effectively a container. This UI renders that content. And as a container, it's very extensible. So we have a very simple content model, and all our experience processes can put content into this experience. And you can see here that I can have many experiences all presented via this one UI. And we call this a personal task list. It's a common activity stream, and the paradigm is it's a personal task list. So if our strategy is to support customers in their jobs to be done, then this is the UI for supporting the tasks which the customer needs to do to effect those jobs. We also have a very safe experience. With this architecture, we are potentially exposing a lot of back-end siloed systems out into this digital experience. And some might think that that's a high-risk proposition because you've suddenly got this channel into lots of systems, etc. But what we can do with these customer experience processes is when they're generating actions, they can generate one-time use tokens. And we can push those one-time use tokens out into this UI. And by doing that, we avoid replay attacks, we avoid denial of service attacks, and these tokens are tightly coupled to the user identifier, which means they can only be used in an authenticated session. So customer analytics and the next conversation. What's the next customer conversation? This is about personalizing the experiences. So what we can do is for each interaction, we can store in a database what the customer did. So over time, we build up a profile of the customer's behavior, their preferences. And for new interactions, when an event comes in and starts up a customer experience, we can interrogate that analytics database. We can look at what the customer's preferences are, what they did in the past. We can put that information through a decision gateway or a decision business rules process. And we can decide on what are the actions we want to give this customer, what are the options we want to give this customer. And again, this is the process which effectively publishes content out into that user experience. So it's the personalized experience. And with this, we're really looking forward to how decision modeling notation and DMN will help us to effect these business rule tasks. And I'm really looking forward to realizing the promise that we can put decision tables in the hands of business users and they can start to try and massage some of these experiences themselves rather than relying on the programmers. So really looking forward to that. So what are some of the challenges? Well, the technology is easy. BPM technology is great. It works. It's accessible. Deploy it. Your legacy systems might pose some challenges. We're relying on being able to get events out of those legacy systems to instantiate and react with our processes. But often the systems are not designed for this architecture. So we find that the events coming out of these systems might be too low level. They're effectively logging events. So you need to do something about that. Or at the other end of the spectrum, we can find that the events are too high level. They're more oriented towards notifying customers. So therefore, they're missing some of the semantics. Sometimes you might have systems which don't generate events at all. And in that case, you might consider generating them yourself. And we've prototyped some processes where with timers we can kind of synthesize events. So technology is easy apart from your legacy systems. The next challenge is process modeling. As I said, these processes are slightly unusual. They're less transformational. They're very hierarchical in their state machines. They kind of look a little unusual because you've got lots of receive events and lots of wait states, etc. So there's a challenge in being able to switch your process modeling paradigm from more procedural to these more state-based. And the type of person who can do this for you is rare. They need a mix of skills. They need a kind of programming background that can understand how to interact with events, event-driven programming and state machines. They need a process modeling background. In order to model these in BPMN, you need to be quite strong in BPMN. They need to be able to put themselves in the customer's shoes in order to ask, what is it the customer really wants? What's the experience the customer wants? So these people are rare, but they can be extremely productive, because if you've got these systems and you can realize this process layer on the top, you can generate experiences very quickly, they can be very agile, and they perform very well. So if you do have these people, look after them and keep them. So it's been my pleasure sharing my passion for BPM and event-driven process engineering for great customer experiences with you. So in summary, BPM technology for building interactive event-driven processes can engineer great experiences. It can deliver them fast, it can deliver them agile, and you get predictable customer experiences. And why do we want to do this? Because digital disruption is everywhere. Customer experience is the new differentiator. Customer experience is the emerging battleground. Customers want access to information. They want access to relevant information. They want to be able to act on that information, and they want assured service delivery. So establish the BPM technology, establish the methodology, and establish the talent to actually do this. So use BPM technology as one of your tools to engineer customer experiences. Don't restrict yourselves to transformational processes. Think reactive. Put yourselves in the customer's shoes. Think, what's the customer want? What's the next conversation? Now, you might have some questions on event correlation, or how far we have progressed, or even on hierarchical state machine modeling. So any questions from the audience? None.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for these insights. One question, how far did you get with what you presented today? For instance, the mobile interface, is that already implemented, or is that a concept idea so far?
Okay, so I would love to say we're in production and everything is, customers are loving it. So at the moment, what we have is we've done our proof of concepts, and we've got our prototype user interfaces, and we put them in what we call our customer experience lab. So we actually expose these to customers, and we get feedback from the customers. So we've been planning this kind of customer experience and user interface paradigm for quite some time, and we're currently still in the build, but this is our experience thus far with using this kind of architecture and seeing how far we can push it. Yeah.
Yeah, you almost answered my question a little bit. You said a lot about what the customer wants.
Yep.
And I was wondering, how do you know?
Yeah, so
let me extend that question. So I'm interested in whether you are able to get any information from the instances that you're already running, and maybe process logs, stuff like that. Anything institutionalized, business intelligence from your own machines.
Yep. So to answer the first question, like I said, because we have adopted this customer centricity, customer experience, customer first transformation, we do have a methodology where we engage customers and we get their feedback. So when we're doing product development or experiences, etc., we ask the customers what they want. And the second part of your question was about getting existing feedback. So I'll answer that in two ways. One is our architectural intent is by using this architecture, we can capture the actions the customers did choose and we can infer the actions they didn't. So the intent with that last customer conversation is we'll build up a large analytics store and we can start to use that to shape the experiences, etc. In terms of access to current analytics, like most organizations, we've got our existing analytics for web interaction and mobile channel interaction, but it's really kind of siloed at the moment and we haven't yet integrated that into this kind of architectural thinking. But looking forward, you would expect that they would converge because they're both feeding the same outcome, ultimately. Yeah.
One more question? Hello.
The question I want to ask is, I understood that you are very focused on the customer, and I would be interested in if you also have a focus on B2B connections, like post organizations from other countries. So kind of, if I parcel something to my sister in Australia and it goes out of the range of DLH, then it was received by Australian Post, and then the information is cut for me. So what about business-to-business information transfer? Do you think about that too?
It's a great question. So it's about B2B, B2C, international parcels, etc. To answer that, my focus at the moment is more on the consumer experience. So everything I've spoken about today is really about the consumer experience. But when we do receive those international parcels, as soon as they get ingested into our logistics network, then that will generate an event. And from that event, if we can identify the actual consumer recipient, then I can generate one of these great customer experiences. So that's more oriented with C2C or B2C. When it comes to B2B, yep.
One more question. We have the red light from Natasha. Okay, last one.
Okay. How do you go about connecting the process layer with these things that you get from the web designers? So in between this, do you do? Okay. How do you connect the web layer from the web designers to the process layer? Do you do the plumbing yourself, or are you using a product?
In our proof of concept, we're just doing the plumbing ourselves, and the architecture for anybody who's into the technical architectures is we use a pattern called CQRS, which is Command Query Response Separation. So the pattern is these processes just have to publish content to a content store, and the content is normalized such that it can fit into effectively the UI paradigm. And then from that content store, whenever the device is refreshed or there's an interaction, it can pull the latest content from that content store and render it. The way we would typically architect this is we're very API first, and so we have your typical Angular client or your mobile client. It calls an API, and in this case, it would just call an API for give me the latest content for that common activity feed. It will come as an XML stream or a JSON stream, and then the client will render it. So process layer responsible just for publishing content to the content distribution layer, client responsible for pulling it from the content distribution layer and rendering. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you.